The earliest memories I have are gloomy blue photos. Before I was 5, Dad went, a figure in a faded snapshot hidden in a dusty album. Mother Anna became into a tempest looming over our small apartment. She would alternate between feverishly cleaning the kitchen floor and moaning about beginning over, and then she would grab me tightly and give me a hug that would leave me gasping for air. Though rare, these stifling embraces were the only signs of affection I yearned for. I was mostly just a little shadow following her around. She would dart around the room, a worry-stricken expression on her face that seemed to have its own personality. Occasionally, when her brow furrowed and her worry lines became deeper, she would leave me downstairs with Mrs. Rodriguez. The tension in the air would crackle like static electricity when Mom eventually came back. With a displeased sigh, she would tousle my hair in a way that seemed more like a duty than a loving gesture. Then an ephemeral smile would appear on her face, giving me a taste of the warmth I so badly wanted. Mom went back on the dating scene. We met Alex, a man whose eyes wrinkled at the corners as he chuckled. His movements were soft and quiet, unlike Mom's frenzied movements. In our stressful home, his generosity toward me felt out of place. I remember lying on the couch clinging to him one day after a really embarrassing event at school with Jessica Miller and her entourage, tears clouding my eyesight. "Why do they always pick on me?" I muttered into his shirt, my chest tightening with that familiar sting of loneliness. He knelt in front of me, a care in his eyes that I didn't usually see in grown-ups. Wiping away a stray tear, he added quietly, "They pick on you because they're insecure. They want to feel powerful by making others feel small." His statements were like a balm to my wounded soul. Something inside of me flickered with hope at that very instant. Perhaps, just possibly, things were beginning to get better. However, hope in my environment was brittle, easily broken like a butterfly. Next was Lily, a little happy ball with eyes much like Mom's. A year later, she came, and all of a sudden I was no longer the center of attention. It felt as though all the warmth and affection vanished, to be replaced by a frigid indifference. Mom completely turned her attention to Lily, leaving me to figure out the perplexing world of childhood on my own. At 14, I had uncomfortable braces, a frizzy halo around my head all the time, and a knot of fear in my stomach the size of Texas that had grown into a full-blown weed garden because of Mom's negative attitude toward me. Consider taking pictures on picture day at school. Mom took the day off work to choose the ideal glittering outfit and worry over Lily's pigtails. She let out a sigh as she dug through my closet when it was my time. She mumbled, "Ugh, nothing decent here." Naturally, Lily looked like a tiny princess on photo day, whereas I looked like a rumpled dandelion in comparison to her sunflower. Lily's photo delighted Mom, whereas mine was met with a sidelong glance and a contemptuous groan. Alex, may his good heart bless him, made an effort to be the voice of hope in my life. Sometimes he would take me shopping and assist me in selecting things that fit and flatter me. I remember clinging to him one day after a very stressful day with Mom because I was so desperate for consolation. The word escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Dad." He froze, and a look of pain appeared on his face. Mom materialized in the doorway, her gaze intense. "You only have one father, Elena," she swore, anger in her voice. "And trust me, he deserves you." Her remarks felt sharp as a slap. Alex gave my hair an awkward ruffle as she sensed the strain. With a murmur, "Look, it's okay." "It's not okay," I gasped, my eyes starting to flood up with tears. Lily, who had been smugly observing the entire situation, spoke up out of nowhere, saying, "Daddy, Elena has been terrible again. Without my asking, she snatched my chocolates." The land of first loves, uncomfortable dances, and a persistent knot of nerves in my gut is 16. But in my household, dating was a minefield. Mom had a way of ruining any romance before it had a chance to take off. Consider Mark as an example. He was everything an adolescent girl could hope for. Tall, humorous, and endowed with a smile that could melt glaciers. I eventually worked up the guts to ask him out after sending him tense texts and stealing glances for several weeks. "Yes," he replied. The prospect of him meeting Mom caused anxiety to swiftly replace the excitement that was bubbling up inside of me. Mom went into overdrive the night of our date. Making ensuring Lily's bedtime story lasted forever, she fussed over it. When Mark did show up, she smiled but did not open her eyes. He looked apprehensive, but sweet. "Elena never cleans her room," she said inoffensively, as though talking about the climate. "You might find socks and pizza boxes under that mountain of clothes." I felt like my cheeks were on fire. Mark laughed nervously, but the uncomfortable silence dragged on like a bad joke. The remainder of the night was a complete bust. Mom went into overdrive the night of our date. Making sure Lily's bedtime story lasted forever, she fussed over it. When Mark did show up, she smiled but did not open her eyes. He looked apprehensive, but sweet. "Elena never cleans her room," she said inoffensively, as though talking about the climate. "You might find socks and pizza boxes under that mountain of clothes." I felt like my cheeks were on fire. Mark laughed nervously, but the uncomfortable silence dragged on like a bad joke. The remainder of the night was a complete bust. Mom kept making snide remarks about my weight, my taste in music, even my choice of college. By the end of the night, Mark practically ran out the door, leaving me feeling like a deflated balloon. The story repeated itself with a few unfortunate guys after that. Each time I brought someone home, Mom would turn into a master of backhanded compliments and subtle digs. My self-confidence took a nosedive, and any potential relationship fizzled out faster than a wet firecracker. 18. The age of college applications, nervous goodbyes, and a fierce determination to break free from the suffocating grip of my childhood. Senior year became my mission control, a strategic plan to launch myself into a world where Mom's negativity couldn't reach me. College applications became my weapon of choice. I spent hours hunched over the kitchen table, pouring my heart and dreams onto those pristine white pages. Every acceptance letter was a victory, a tiny shard of hope chipping away at the wall Mom had built around me. Of course, she didn't make it easy. When I announced my acceptance to a university across the state, her reaction was a masterpiece of passive aggression. "Oh, Elena," she sighed, shaking her head. "So far away. How will we ever see each other?" It was a question loaded with guilt, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. "We can video chat, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "Besides, there are these things called airplanes." Alex, my ever-supportive anchor, was thrilled for me. "This is amazing, Elena," he beamed, pulling me into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you." His words were a warm hug on a cold day. He may not have been my dad by blood, but he felt more like one than the man who walked out on us all those years ago. College was a revelation. Surrounded by people who didn't know my family history, I finally felt like I could breathe. I blossomed in a sea of new experiences, challenging myself academically and forging friendships that felt genuine and supportive. 27. The land of adulting. Spreadsheets that never seemed to end, and a tiny apartment that felt like a palace compared to my cramped childhood bedroom. Life, for the most part, was good. My job as an economist kept my brain buzzing, and David, my amazing boyfriend for the past few years, brought a warmth and laughter into my life I hadn't known before. One evening, over takeout Thai food and a bottle of wine, David dropped a bombshell. "So," he said, looking at me with that goofy grin I adored, "I think it's time we met each other's parents." My stomach lurched. Meeting David's folks was easy. a breeze even. They lived in a cozy house with a backyard that smelled like freshly cut grass and welcomed me with open arms. His mom, Sarah, practically smothered me in hugs, and his dad, Michael, spent the entire evening cracking jokes that had me snorting into my napkin. They were warm, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. It felt normal, a word I never dared associate with family dinners in my past life. But the thought of David meeting my interesting family filled me with dread. How could I explain the years of emotional neglect, the constant jabs, the suffocating negativity? I told him everything. The fights, the tears, the way Mom had chipped away at my self-esteem for years. Lily, unsurprisingly, hadn't gotten any better. Now a master manipulator who knew exactly how to push my buttons, David listened patiently, his hand resting gently on mine. "Elena," he said firmly, "I'm marrying you, not your family. They may be baggage, but you're the prize." His words were a balm to my soul, a declaration of love that washed away years of doubt. Maybe, just maybe, I could finally build a happy family of my own, one filled with love, acceptance, and laughter. The kind of family I never had, but the kind I always deserved. My stomach twisted tighter than a pretzel as I dialed Alex's number. This was it. D-Day for breaking the news about David and the engagement. "Hey, Elena, what's up?" Alex's familiar voice boomed through the phone. "Hey, Alex," I said, taking a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you." I launched into the story, spilling the beans about David, the proposal, and the upcoming wedding. There was a comfortable silence on the other end of the line. Then a genuine laugh erupted. "Elena, that's fantastic. I'm so happy for you both." His words washed over me like a warm wave, easing some of the anxiety. "Listen," he continued, "you've got to bring him over for dinner. Let me meet the guy who finally snagged you." David, bless his supportive heart, was all for it. So, a few weeks later, we found ourselves pulling up to my childhood home, a place that still held a strange mix of nostalgia and dread. Mom answered the door, her face breaking into a surprised smile. "Elena, you came to visit. And who is this handsome fella?" "Mom, this is David, my fiancé," I said, offering a tight smile. David stepped forward, extending a hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Turner." Mom beamed, shaking his hand a little too enthusiastically. "The pleasure's all mine, dear. So, David, what do you do for a living?" David, oblivious to the undercurrent of Mom's question, launched into a detailed explanation of his work as a director at a large company. Alex, ever the smooth operator, chimed in with jokes and stories, keeping the conversation flowing. Lily, of course, wasn't about to be outdone. She spent the entire meal batting her eyelashes at David, interrupting our conversations to pepper him with questions about his job and hobbies. Mom, ever the doting mother, fawned over Lily's every word, a stark contrast to the thinly veiled barbs she kept throwing my way. "Elena, honey," she'd say, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "you really should take some fashion tips from Lily. That dress you're wearing, well, it's not exactly flattering." David, thankfully, seemed oblivious to the dogs, but I knew exactly what Mom was doing. She was suddenly putting me down, making me feel insecure right in front of my fiancé. The entire dinner felt like a twisted performance, a play where I was constantly reminded of how I wasn't good enough, not pretty enough, not successful enough. By the time dessert rolled around, I was ready to run screaming. As soon as it was polite, we made our excuses and left. The moment we were safely buckled into the car, David let out a long sigh. "Your mom? She's a character, isn't she?" he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Yeah," I muttered, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. "She can be—" He squeezed my hand gently. "But hey, we made it through dinner, right?" He was right. We had. And even with Mom's negativity hanging in the air like a bad smell, the simple act of holding David's hand filled me with a sense of strength and purpose. This was my future. A future I was building with him, not with my dysfunctional family. The warm glow of post-dinner satisfaction lingered in the air as David and I curled up on the couch, poring over wedding magazines. We envisioned a small, intimate ceremony in a charming vineyard, surrounded by the people who loved and supported us. It was perfect. Then, the next morning, the dream shattered into a million pieces. My phone buzzed with David's name. His usual cheerful ringtone was replaced by a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "Elena," he said, his voice tight with a mix of anger and disbelief, "we have a problem." My stomach lurched. "What's wrong?" I asked. He took a deep breath. "Your mom." The blood drained from my face. "What did she do this time?" David explained, his words hitting me like punches. Mom, the ever-reliable manipulator, had somehow unearthed his work phone number and, instead of a congratulatory call, she'd unleashed a verbal tirade that would make a sailor blush. Apparently, in her twisted world, I was the epitome of inadequacy. Ugly, dull, and lacking any social graces. It didn't stop there. She'd even dragged Dad into it, dredging up his abandonment years ago like a weapon. But the pièce de résistance. She'd suggested David ditch me and turn his sights on Lily, claiming my younger sister was the epitome of beauty and brains. Fury boiled up inside me, a hot, venomous rage. How dare she try to sabotage my happiness yet again? David, bless his heart, was furious too, but he channeled his anger into something unexpected. A plan. A crazy, audacious plan that was equal parts risky and thrilling. "We expose her," he said, his jaw clenched. "We set a trap." The plan was audacious in its simplicity. David would call Mom back, pretend to be swayed by her words, and arrange a meeting to discuss this ludicrous proposal. His goal was to record this entire conversation on his phone. David made the call, his voice smooth and convincing. Mom, completely oblivious to the web she was about to walk into, readily agreed to meet him for coffee. A nervous laugh bubbled up from my chest. This was it. Operation Momzilla Takedown was a go. The outcome was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let my mother dictate my future any longer. This time the tables were turning, and I was ready to play for keeps. I decided to attend their meeting. The thought of confronting Mom, especially disguised as a stranger, sent shivers down my spine. But the anger simmering inside me, the anger at her constant negativity and her attempt to sabotage my happiness, was a powerful motivator. Back in my comfy jeans and a worn-out t-shirt, I slipped into a corner booth at a bustling cafe across the street from our designated meeting spot. Thick black glasses perched on my nose completed the disguise, transforming me into a nondescript observer. Butterflies danced a frenetic jig in my stomach as I watched Mom saunter into the cafe, a triumphant smile plastered on her face. She spotted David at the prearranged table in a private room, her smile widening further. This was it. Operation Momzilla Takedown was officially underway. David, bless his tech-savvy heart, had discreetly turned on the dictaphone on his phone. I heard their entire conversation in the immediate vicinity. Their conversation started innocently enough, David playing the part of the interested suitor. Then Mom, completely ignoring his phone, launched into her diatribe. "You know, David," she began, leaning in conspiratorially, "Elena just isn't wife material." My blood ran cold. The woman who was supposed to be my mother, the woman who was supposed to love and support me, was bad-mouthing me to a complete stranger. "She's, a bit simple," Mom continued, her voice laced with fake sympathy. "Not very pretty either, if you know what I mean." David, to his credit, kept his face impassive, simply nodding along and murmuring non-committal phrases. Inside, I knew he must be fuming, but then Mom's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Now, that's a girl with potential, smart, beautiful, knows how to handle herself in society, the audacity of it all. Lily, with her airhead personality and complete lack of work ethic, was apparently the epitome of elegance and intelligence, according to Mom. The conversation continued, a masterclass in manipulation and deceit. Blinded by her own delusions, Mom even confessed to never loving my stepfather, claiming she'd only married him for his money. The woman had no shame. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mom stood up, her face radiating self-satisfaction. Well, David, it was lovely meeting you. Think about what I said, she purred, patting his hand with a perfectly manicured nail as she walked out of the cafe. I could only shake my head in disbelief. So what now? I asked, my voice tight. David pulled me into a hug, his touch a source of comfort amidst the swirling storm of emotions. Now, he said, his voice firm, we expose her. The air crackled with tension as I walked into my childhood home that weekend. Mom's smile was a mile wide, radiating a smugness that set my teeth on edge. Elena, honey, you won't believe it, she gushed, the words tumbling out before I even had a chance to say hello. What's that, Mom? I asked, already bracing myself for a bombshell. David, she declared, her voice dripping with sickening satisfaction, decided to see reason. He's leaving you and marrying Lily. My heart did a little stutter, but I forced a smile. That's great, Mom. Really happy for them. My stepdad, bless his perpetually confused soul, cleared his throat. But I thought they were getting married. Lily, who had been lounging on the couch like a pampered cat, snorted a laugh. Apparently not, Dad. Elena just wasn't good enough for him. Shocker. I ignored her snide remark, my eyes locked on Mom's triumphant face. It was showtime. Actually, Mom, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, David's right here. Just then, David walked in, a sly grin plastered on his face. His presence sent a collective gasp echoing through the room. Hi, everyone, he said, his voice smiling. Just in time for a little family fun. He pulled out his phone and pressed play. The room fell silent as Mom's voice, dripping with malice, filled the air. The conversation from the cafe played in its entirety. Her diatribe about me, her praise for Lily, the shocking confession about my stepfather. The color drained from Mom's face with each passing sentence. Stepdad turned a shade of pale white, his jaw slack with disbelief. As for Lily, her bravado crumbled, replaced by a terrified whimper. When the recording ended, a deathly silence descended upon the room. Then my stepfather exploded. His tone trembling with rage, he shouted, "You lying snake! You married me for money all these years." For once in my life, Mom appeared truly disoriented. She started to cry, but her tears were drowned out by the fury that was building up in my stepfather's face. He exclaimed, "I want a divorce," in a furious tone. "Get a lawyer." The room fell apart. Lily and Mom started crying, their sobs a chorus of sorrow and self-loathing. With all due respect, David appeared to be as at ease as a fish out of water caught in a hurricane. I had an odd feeling of tranquility in the middle of the commotion. At last, the naked, nasty reality was revealed. The years of suppressed hurt, deceit, and manipulation all came to the surface, destroying our dysfunctional family's facade. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of my stepdad's choking cries and Lily's cold looks whenever we saw each other at the grocery store. Mom, the mastermind behind the whole catastrophe, withdrew behind a social media blackout that she had imposed on herself. For my part, I felt oddly empty. There was a void that needed to be filled after the fury that had driven me for so long. David came upon me lounging on the couch one bright day, aimlessly leafing through wedding magazines that now appeared to be ancient artifacts from another century. "Hey," he said in a worried-sounding voice. "You all right?" I forced a flimsy smile. Yes, I was just pondering. Everything seems so radically different. He pulled me into an embrace as he slid onto the couch next to me. "It is," he conceded, "but difference can sometimes be beneficial. An opportunity to begin anew, you know." His remarks served as a subtly encouraging prod. Perhaps he was correct. Maybe something fresh and interesting may fill the emptiness left by Mom. Something lit up in my chest. I then uttered, "What do you say we do something crazy?" with a playful twinkle in my eyes. David raised his eyebrows. "Crazy? Like what?" "How about a road trip?" I proposed, a smile forming on my face. "Just the wide road, a map, and us. There are no deadlines or expectations, just sheer adventure. You had me on a road trip," he said. So our plans changed drastically. The carefully orchestrated vineyard ceremony turned into an impromptu road trip, with little more than a beat-up camper van full with necessities, an abundance of food, an incredible playlist, and a well-worn copy of On the Road. We set out with the hope of making new memories and experiencing new things together. A year later, David and I were saying our vows at the altar beneath an arch of fragrant flowers. Although it wasn't the grandiose ceremony I had imagined, it was nonetheless ideal. My recently divorced and estranged stepdad, who is not close to Lily, escorted me down the aisle instead of my disapproving mother. His eyes were filled with regretful and proud tears. His lips pressed against mine as he whispered, "You know, kiddo, I always knew you'd find your happily ever after." After the wedding, everything fell into a cozy routine. Together, David and I created a life that was full of love, laughing, and the odd, exciting road trip. My stepdad started coming around frequently, telling us tales of his adventures and making not-so-subtle suggestions that he wanted to be a grandpa. I would say, laughing, "Don't worry, you'll be the best grandpa ever."